Good morning everyone. I hope you all are doing great. In my previous video, I had taught you the stanza-wise explanation of the poem After Blenheim. This particular video is going to deal with the theme, the title justification, and the poetic devices used in the poem. After Blenheim is an anti-war poem which describes the Battle of Blenheim that took place in the year 1704. Through a conversation between an old man and his grandchildren, this poem depicts a common man's ignorance about the real picture of war. War causes widespread death and destruction. But old Caspar seems to have an unconcerned attitude towards this, as he repeatedly claims that it was a famous victory. His gruesome descriptions, followed by his casual attitude, seem ironic and bring forth the horrors of war. The poem also projects the generation gap and the difference in viewpoints of the old and the new generation. At the beginning of the poem, old Caspar is relaxing during a summer evening. After the day's work, he is sitting outside his cottage door. Wilhelmine is playing near her grandfather. Peterkin, who was playing near the rivulet, discovers something large and round. After he starts playing with it, it attracts the attention of his sister Wilhelmine. On Caspar's close inspection, it turns out to be a skull. Caspar explains to his grandchildren that the thing they are playing with is some poor fellow's skull who must have died fighting in the War of Blenheim. Caspar describes how he finds such skulls in his garden each time he plows his fields. Young Peterkin asks Caspar to tell him and his sister what the war was all about and what was the reason for the war. Caspar responds that while the English easily defeated the French, he cannot remember what they were fighting over. He cannot give any good reason for war and can only repeat that it was a famous victory. Caspar further explains that his father lived in Blenheim at the time of the battle. The soldiers burned his house down, forcing him and his family to flee. The war brought death and destruction. Many innocent women and children were killed. Throughout the poem, Caspar unknowingly emphasizes the pointless glory of war without caring for the actual loss of human lives. He proudly declares the English Duke of Marlborough and the native Bavarian Prince Eugene as two of the great heroes of the battle. Wilhelmine stresses that war is wicked, but Caspar disagrees with her on the basis that it was a famous victory. Echoing his sister, Peterkin asks what good came out of the war. Again, Caspar pleads ignorance and only replies, but it was a famous victory. Justification of title. The title of the poem After Blenheim is very appropriate as the poet discusses the after effects of the battle fought between the English and the French at a small village, Blenheim. The poem presents a conversation between an old man Caspar and his two grandchildren at the place where once the famous battle was fought. The horrors of war can be presented through the skulls which frequently come out when the farmer ploughs the field. As Caspar says, I find them in the garden, for there is many here about. Caspar's father had to flee from Blenheim with his family as the French soldiers burnt his dwelling to the ground. The country was burning and innocent people were killed. Fire and sword, which are symbols of human cruelty and destruction, clearly portray the horrendous scenario of Blenheim after the battle was fought. The poet further tells that after the war was won, the battlefield was full of dead bodies of the soldiers, and these bodies were rotting in the sun as they were not given proper burial. So we can say that the title After Blenheim is apt. So students, let us discuss the themes of the poem. The first theme is meaninglessness of war. In the poem After Blenheim, Southey attempts to capture the ignorance of men about the negative effects of war on the lives and properties of human beings. War represents the worst form of human behavior, that is man's cruelty to man. The skull that Peterkin finds in the field, as well as the corpses, adds up to present the horrid aspect of war. Men, women, and children suffer physical pain and mental anguish. Ordinary soldiers lay down their lives. People kill each other, burn down houses, and destroy the spirit of humanity to achieve the pointless great victory. Caspar's boastfulness at the large and round skull and his outburst of praises for the war heroes intensify the tragic ignorance of men and the loss of harmony and unity. He accepts the loss of lives on the famous battlefield as the price that one has to pay for a famous victory. So we can say that the poem not only shows the effects and after effects of war, but it also shows how state propaganda can totally brainwash the common man. After being brainwashed, the common man even blindly supports something that has only caused pain and suffering. This poem is a wake-up call to seek peaceful solutions to all conflicts. Generation gap. Another theme that the poem seems to project is the difference between the viewpoints of the old and the new generation. The old men, like Caspar, have no fresh thinking over almost anything. They are conventional and undaring. They are mostly guided by blind patriotism. On the other hand, the children's responses to all things are simple, innocent, and instinctive. The two children in the poem have different line of thinking, which is logical too. They do not understand how their grandfather could praise the war, which was totally purposeless and destructive. But the old man continues to stick to his conventional opinion of war. He has no reply to the searching questions of his little grandchildren. Form and style. The poem is in a form of a ballad. Ballad is a poem or song narrating a story in short stanzas. So it is separated into 11 equal verses. The poet has followed the rhyming scheme A, B, C, B, D, D in all the stanzas except the second one. In the second stanza, the end rhyme is A, B, C, D, D, D. The style used by the poet is a conversation between two people of different ages. The younger age representing vigor, restlessness, and curiosity, whereas the old age depicts experience, loyalty, and passivity. Literary devices. The first is archaism. Archaism is the use of archaic or obsolete words. Now in this example we can see, "Nay, nay, my little girl, quoth he." Here quoth is an example of archaic word. Second is alliteration. In several stanzas, Southey uses alliteration to promote rhyme and euphony. Here are some examples. The first example is, "Now tell us what it was all about." Here we can find the repetition of the sound T. Next is, "With wonder waiting eyes," the repetition of W. The next is, "They say it was a shocking sight." Here the repetition of S sound is there. The next is irony. The poem uses irony when old Casper says, "But it was a famous victory," or regards the war as a great victory but doesn't know why. "Why, that I cannot tell," said he. Actually, it was not a great victory. War cannot be great in any way. Casper's gruesome description, followed by his casual sayings, create an effect of irony in the poem. Metonymy. It is a figure of speech in which a thing or concept is referred to by the name of something closely associated with it. In the line, "And by him spotted on the green," green refers to the grassland, as grass is green in color. The next is refrain. Refrain is a group of words repeated at certain parts in a poem, song, or a speech. So here a recurring line comes at the end of some stanzas. "But it was a famous victory." And such use of repetition is another prominent feature of a ballad. Old Casper continuously repeats the sentence as this is all he knows about the war. But this is certainly not what the poem is saying. Rather, Southey uses this phrase to emphasize the exact opposite, that it wasn't really a great victory. War can never be great. It is a highly effective way of making his point. Students, here is an extract from the poem with a few questions. You need to do this worksheet in your FAIR English Literature notebook. Thank you, dear students. Stay safe and God bless you.